Welcome back to the TDP podcast. I'm Alex Furchess. This episode is the second in a series of 4 featuring a conversation I had with Sander Kamphuis, CEO of Moovd. This company has created WeMind, an AI-augmented EMDR software. And in this episode, we get a lot more into the controversy. At the end of the episode, actually, something gets brainstormed, which we think, and a number of other people think, is going to change the future of how EMDR clinicians are trained. As a facilitator for the EMDR Institute, I am thrilled. So stick around for that. But first, I challenge him with a few questions, especially about the fake outcomes I've seen from brief treatment, where people come back 3 years later with symptoms as bad as ever and say, oh, I just need another dose. The therapist did this with me, and I just need another dose, where early trauma was ignored or attachment wins. As well, I challenge Sander with the fact that AI learns by failing. So do we. What happens when AI does the failing for us? Really hope you enjoy this episode and stick around for the remaining 2.
Makes sense. In US, in my opinion, therapist and client relation is a bit more important. People are people are seeing sometimes the therapist for years and years. In the Netherlands, that's sometimes the case, but in general, you do 4 sessions, 8 sessions, and then you're out. So it's about efficiency as well, getting the right outcome. And I think they're deficit from the US. But the interesting topic would also be like, what can technology, so not only AI, do to make that whole pathway more efficient, more effective, help a clinician or a client more and more in their EMDR journey? And I think in the upcoming years, you will see a lot of innovations coming through EMDR as well, where you already see them in all different topics. One simple example, radiology or screening photos in a hospital, it's all AI doing that, making sure it's done correct, and it can do it more efficient. So why don't introduce those type of technologies in EMDR and see what it can do if we research it? And I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. I think that what some might say is that that working with the lower brain through working memory taxation and releasing stuck material in the that gets stuck in limbic mode. There's not a lot of ways to fully research this. They've just got some fMRI studies and things like that, but it's not, they're not dissecting people and finding stuck memories in the amygdala and so on. But I think one of the objections would be that attachment is at the core of a lot of complex trauma that is from childhood. Like that's kind of an obvious statement there, but that addressing attachment issues requires relationship, and that relationship should be allowed to last as short a time as possible. Obviously, we don't want the client in therapy forever, but as long as is necessary to produce a lasting outcome. And so that would be kind of an American style objection that you might receive. And so that brings me to something that I wanted to ask is, do you plan to do, I have a follow-up question to this, but do you plan to do outcome studies, and how far out do you plan to go?
Yes, we're planning that already for a long time. To be honest, the studies we do are always guided by the researcher and the clinic, the EMDR clinic, because we want to do it objective, of course. So it's always a matter of funding to do a large clinical trial, like 3 years, 5 years. So we're planning to do one of the bigger clinical trials here in the Netherlands, with a time horizon of 3 years. That's what we're thinking of. We try to connect it to what other clinics are doing research in. So there's, for example, Psytrack. They're doing a lot of studies. So they have everything they talk about, it's studied and researched. we don't see a reason to change the way they do it, follow up. So if they do it 6 months, 12 months, we want to do it the same. So we just try to connect with organizations like that.
Mhm. Yeah, because and I know that you're not a clinician, but one issue that I see, I always ask guests about outcome studies and things like that, because one issue that I see is that brief treatment is very cool. I could tell like my own war stories, but on this program I don't. I try to really avoid speaking about my own clinical examples because this is about you.
Hmm.
Um, in any case, I've seen, some apparently, I mean, miraculous results that people would not believe from things like Flash and EMDR 2.0 with very complex cases. Um, and while my approach is to address the attachment through the relationship at the same time, um, when I get a certain type of client who comes to me and says they come in very, very nervous, very panicked a little bit, they're just, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on?
Hmm.
And they say, well, I did EMDR before. I did EMDR 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and it worked. So just please wave your fingers in front of my face again and make it go away. And
Yeah,
what I find is that they had a very successful treatment that seemed like a miracle, and it was rather brief treatment. But what happened is that dissociative material from childhood was not addressed, usually because it was not detected by the clinician,
yeah,
sometimes because the client didn't want to share it. And so this is my primary concern with brief treatments is not them not working, but is with them working.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
these symptoms, because we didn't get, like Francine Shapiro says, we didn't get at that target memory. We didn't get at that core root of the weed and pull it out. The weed of PTSD symptoms,
yeah.
or it just grows back worse than ever. And these people are very, very difficult to treat. I'm wondering if you have run into complex trauma from childhood being detected as it often is during reprocessing, and what you do about that.
Yeah, I think the important case you're mentioning here is that how important the assessment of the professional of the clinician is in this case. And we basically built, and I'm bringing it back to the WeMind platform. We just tried to build a platform that helped clinicians be the best at and desensitization in a session or all the different phases. But if the clinicians didn't do a right target selection, we don't do anything in that. So we don't try to interfere in that. So it's we don't want to do that as well. Like it's so important that a clinician can do that really well. I think um, in this case, what you're saying, it doesn't matter, in our opinion, if you're doing a study on effectiveness of our product compared to doing the same thing with regular EMDR, how the target is selected, because we don't interfere in that. But let me tell you, I think an interesting story. That's more of the research that we're going to do. So we try to build the product on delivering EMDR, but it's up to the clinician how to do it, when to do it, and on what target to do it. So we don't plan on doing especially research on that. And I have no idea if AI or technology will have a role in that. But one interesting thing that came up, and that's what we're going to do bigger research on as a company, is that we found a way a few years ago with reaction times of a client
Hmm.
to assess the working memory capacity of a client. That was not something, yeah, it is invented years ago, but it was not something that we thought of as EMDR years ago of, hey, let's do it like that.
Mhm.
So with new technology, we've built a way to optimize the working memory stimulation. Now, a few of our users came up with a research project because they found that there could be a correlation between the SUD decrease and the level of speed of the taxation that they monitor in the app. So what they see is during a session, you normally ask the SUT to the client.
Mhm.
They say we don't have to ask the SUT to the client because we see out of how good they're performing, how the memory is processed. So as showed in the video before, let's say the taxation is at level 25%.
Mhm.
Somewhere in the set, it shoots up to 90 out of nowhere. So that means, in their opinion, that's the idea, that there's more room in the working memory of that client because the memory is processed to perform the task. And then when they ask the SUT, it is 0 or 1 or 2. So the app is helping me with a right assessment of how the SUT is decreased. And that's not something we came up with when we initially built it, but we're now going
Mhm.
to research it because it can be a really good indicator of how effective the session was. Because SUT is some sort of subjective. It's a scale. It's something.
That's what it stands for, right? Subjective units of disturbance.
I know, but can there
Yeah.
be some type of technology that could do it objective? I'm not sure.
Mhm.
We're gonna research it, and I think that's like the interesting parts. I would say in the upcoming years, we're not there. We're not marketing that or anything, but let's research it and see if there's technology that can help in that.
Mhm. Yeah,
If that
as
makes sense.
no, it does completely because that's a big problem that so for instance in the child and adolescent trainings we teach don't check the SUD all the time. Like
Hmm.
as you would with an adult, well, you don't check it all the time. You know, it's a return to target, check SUD. It's like wash, rinse, repeat format, Dr.
Yeah.
Shapiro's protocol. But the um, the idea is with children, there's a big demand. Uh, there's like an expectation that this needs to go down, and the
Hmm.
therapist, a new EMDR clinician, can become very frustrated, you know, and become kind of obviously frustrated. And the client, especially a child, the proper answer is yes. And if you
Hmm.
have somebody who's attachment wounded, then even more so because some of their behavior is rather childlike, right? That's the idea. And so
Hmm.
that's good. That's a really good point because that's kind of like proof positive. It's like augmenting your mirror neurons, right?
Hmm.
Like as an experiment, um, for a short time, I did EMDR without checking the SUD. I did check the SUD.
Hmm.
I checked the SUD on the client's face,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I just looked at it and just through experience, I could kind of see, but I didn't necessarily trust myself. And when I was pretty sure that the SUD was like 0 or 1, then I checked it.
Exactly.
And I was usually right
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
but the I suppose just offers more information.
Hmm.
So what I hear you saying is with effects such as this, don't take it as gospel truth. Don't just trust the AI completely.
True.
Use this as feedback to check and question your clinical judgment.
Exactly. I think that's it's helping clinicians. It's not taking over. One example, especially when COVID hit, is that, and I think it's similar to what you're describing with you watching the face. Can technology do that on different
Whoa.
parameters, like
Wow.
reaction time, right? Um, but when COVID hit, everybody switched to remote, and biggest concern was, can you do it safely? And they did a lot of research, and you can. But concerns, what if a client gets emotional or
Mhm.
dissociates? It can be anything. Um, Doing that through a webcam, you have to monitor your client. But what are indicators or parameters that a technology or AI can register that
Mhm.
gives you a heads up as a clinician, like, hey, watch out, or hey, something happens.
Mhm.
We did a first a throw on that with flickering colors when somebody is not responding or is
Mhm.
responding really aggressively or is responding really slow.
Mhm.
And we're not telling you like, hey, this is happening, but like, watch out, something's happening, and then it's up to you. So it's an
Mhm.
indicator. So red means, okay, they're either not getting what they have to do or something happened. And if something
Right.
happens, you can watch it. And that's a small thing, but it will help you be more confident and interfere when something happens. I think that's the role of technology. But in the end, it's about the therapist. He's in full control, but hopefully, it will make her or his work much easier.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the higher prevalence of lawsuits against therapists in the US. Of course, the prevalence of lawsuits is just everywhere, especially against doctors. My wife
Yeah.
is a nurse practitioner, and I think 50% of doctors report that every day they worry about a lawsuit, like
Oh
every
yeah.
day. And so you wind up doing way more than you need to
Yeah.
convince the patient that you did everything you could. So, like, so you won't get sued because you just exhausted yourself trying.
Yeah.
And and so that's kind of tragic because ads research with Sidetrack shows that this use of exposure, this does not make suicide rates go up, and
Hmm.
people are not quitting at Sidetrack because they're suicidal. It makes suicide rates go down, and
Hmm.
people are becoming less suicidal. And the faster you can do something about suicidality, the better.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Hmm.
like if your client kills themselves, you don't have a client to heal. So
True.
so there is
True.
something to be said for a rapid approach, at least initially, just for stabilization. Perhaps people who use a longer term attachment-based model or even a psychodynamic model might consider that using brief treatment initially could be, if they choose, just for purposes of stabilization. Um, so um, I I want to take a short detour because
Hmm.
my brain just like exploded with something. So
Go for it.
I started off with my therapy career. I wish somebody had just taken me to an EMDR training when I was in graduate school. Like I feel like I wasted a lot of time, but I didn't waste time reading Carl Jung. And I was very much into Carl Jung from the beginning. And one of the three most important tools that he had in his analytical psychology outside of dreams and free association was the word association test,
Hmm.
right? And this is where the term complex comes from, where it's how fast someone associates one word with another. Not that you say, well, microphone, and they say mother, right? Stereotypically, right? It's like, oh, but he didn't really care as much about what the client said as how fast they said it. And I know you're not a clinician, so we probably won't get into this, but I'm just wondering if somebody out there, maybe who's a Jungian, like, please come on my program, guys. Like, start answering my emails, Jungians. But the you mentioned that testing working memory capacity can be done with the rapidity of response, right?
True.
That's
True.
exactly how the word association test works. I'm just wondering if there's a crossover there. Who knows?
Interesting. Interesting. And exactly, it will be fascinating to hear somebody from a different approach boiled down to what we're doing and see if there's crossovers and see if there's any connection to be made. I really like that, but yeah, fascinating. So if he or she's on, just let me know. I'm gonna watch that episode.
Well, there's a Jungian guy in a town just north of me in Virginia, um, who I've thought about getting in touch with, who is an analyst who uses EMDR. Now
Hmm.
that is unusual.
Yeah,
That is
true.
highly. So I'd like to speak to that guy. And if there are any Jungians watching, and I just really, really explained the word association test poorly, please let me know. I would love to. I would love to know more about this. I'm not a Jung scholar. And then you can come on my program and call me an idiot. So, so more to come in the second half of this conversation. Check out WeMind along with research and a 2-week free trial at www.moovd.nl/en. That's www.moovd.nl/en. If you're enjoying this conversation and you're a clinician treating complex trauma or a student learning how, Email dissociativetable@gmail.com to join the discussion on the clinicians only discussion board. So I read the research article, right? And I linked to that basic research. Um, it doesn't mention the validity of cognition. It doesn't mention the body scan.
Hmm.
But an ads model, even in Sidetrack, they're doing the full protocol, right? So do
True,
you
true.
find that working memory taxation also helps with phases 5 and 6 dealing with validity of cognition, that statement for those who are not EMDR clinicians of a very core feeling of it's over or I can
Yeah,
handle it,
yeah.
PTSD, and then body sensations of panic perhaps clearing up. Why doesn't the research include that? Was that just too complicated to deal with in one study?
Yeah, I think that you're right on that. For this particular study, we just choose to focus on one of the core things, and that will be SOT decrease. So how long or yeah, how fast did the SOT drop in a session? So let's say a 60-minute
Mhm,
session, how much time did you need? So we were really trying to focus on the phase 4
mhm,
desensitization in this study. We get the product is perfectly suitable for all 8 phases. So you can use our platform for everything, especially installing positive beliefs. Using our way of working memory taxation works extremely well in there as well. But it's a few things. Doing a randomized clinical trial is time consuming, really costly, takes years. So for this instance, we just chose the phase 4. Um,
mhm.
um, so I cannot share any research on that now.
Yeah, well, I hope some comes out because it would be very convincing to a more traditional EMDR clinician. And who knows where that will go. Um,
It's like
but mhm,
one thing to consider is that now we work with a lot of the US trainers. For instance, Roy Kiesling explains it really well in the video when doing one of the first phases. He just starts with a relaxing background, bilateral,
mhm,
slow eye movement. Just start slow. That's, as far as I know, not an approach we take here in the Netherlands at all.
mhm.
It is select a target and we dive into it.
It,
So there you see already the cultural or educational differences in how people approach reprocessing or EMDR. So yeah, maybe it's also an idea to invite Roy Kiesling to the show one day
mhm.
and hear what he's thinking of it.
Yeah, so Roy is, I'd like to return to something we were speaking about earlier with the difference between, with age comes confidence and judgment and so on. But we need new, like the next De Jong, Kiesling, maybe the next Francine Shapiro is currently like 25,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
taking an EMDR training in graduate school and so on. So it's like the youth is possibility. Youth is possibility. Um, so we spoke about AI as augmentation. So like, okay, so I a little bit of background research for this showed up like a great quote from Korean Lakhani, who's a Harvard professor. He wrote in Harvard Business Review, AI will not replace humans, but those with AI will replace humans without
Yeah, true,
AI. So,
true.
and AI researcher Brian Rumley, who is concerned with dispelling kind of this myth of like Skynet and Terminators coming to destroy the EMDR Institute or something like that. um, he was also speaking about the proper use of AI, like we're speaking before we started recording, as sort of like Nikes that make you jump 2 feet higher or something like that. And so I'm going to play devil's advocate here. All right, so I can see as a facilitator that some of the largest concerns that consultees have, and what will often prevent people from even taking weekend two, even though
Mm-hmm.
they had a great training experience, is just putting this into practice. And I can see how this would help with confidence. Um, However, we learn by making mistakes. And I'm not sure that increasing confidence in a way that prevents somebody um, from basically, um, I don't know. I mean, I I had to get beyond the fact that when I started using EMDR, sometimes I would embarrass myself. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
flipping to this page and that page, and that motivated me to learn more, which is, I mean, that's a large language model. I mean, these AI learns by making mistakes as well. This is based on. So again, we talked about a good clinician never healed a client by protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that a good EMDR consultant never um, helped someone become a better clinician by protecting them from screwing up phase four, right? You want to
Yeah.
protect them from
Yeah.
destabilizing a client. I'm not saying like, oh,
True.
just go balls out. And but this is a concern I have, right? Because with a large language model, you could also address negative cognition and positive cognition. You could upload to Jongh, Roger Solomon, my hero Jesse Rappaport. You could upload all their sessions and it would come up with the proper negative cognition and positive cognition. It would help you with that. Consultees have trouble with that. It would help with basic mechanics of 4 and 5, when to return to target, and so on. It would help with blocked reprocessing. And most of all, it would help with cognitive interweaves for blocked
True.
reprocessing. It might, WeMind 5.5 might throw up, or if you don't make it, someone else is going to. I
True.
guarantee. Like the cat's out
Mm-hmm.
of the bag. Someone is going to make a large language model that suggests a cognitive interweave and or gives you three choices or something. So with your model, I don't really have that much concern. I think it would help confidence more than hurt confidence, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about where this could go because, especially with a large language model, you're talking about an increasing ability of AI to take hold of clinical judgment. And
Yeah.
maybe you do so very, very well, but in doing so, like maybe AI Einstein can help you with your physics homework, but then there are no more Einsteins, right? There.
I get you. No, no, true. Like, but the example is in like radiology, AI scanning lung photos of patients with cancer and can do it with a 99.9% accuracy. That saves time for the doctor. Is that doctor making less errors? Yes, hopefully. True, but coming back to EMDR, you could also turn it around. So what if we just create the technology or the AI that's training the clinician and let the clinician make those faults on a fake AI
Mm,
client, right?
yeah, right.
So let's say we don't want to make a therapist make faults in real client sessions,
Mm,
but let them fall into the hole, as you would say here as Dutchies, in a session with a fake client, so an AI that's
right.
doing dissociation on purpose. So it like one example, large language models or the new ChatGPT thing where text is formed to video, really realistic video, like 30-second videos. You cannot see the difference. So let's
Mm,
wait. Let's see.
mm,
Okay, now I want to practice on a client with dissociative disorder. Okay, do a trial session. What happens and what do I do?
right.
Record it, adapt it, give tips. Hey, you did this. We're not there, but there is the advantage of AI if you would flip it. But I get the concerns. But our standpoint would be that, um, of course, making errors in a session is something you will learn from. But if we could prevent them, in the end, would be better. That could be our standpoint. But I get what you're saying.
This is okay. I've got a branding idea for you because this is great. This is really cool because that is a killer idea. The thing you were just talking about, especially with maybe modeling a client with an undetected dissociative disorder,
Exactly.
or maybe covert childhood traumatization that's presenting as an anxiety disorder, perhaps. So the the
This is gonna be posted
yeah
in March, right? So I have
yeah
some time to work on it because I just figured it out.
yeah. So okay, so I am not a Star Trek fan, but I think I heard this from a client or something like that fairly recently. So okay, so in apparently like Star Trek training academy or whatever, it's cool that we're talking about sidetrack, but Starfleet Training Academy, they have a simulation of a really hard ethical situation in combat
Hmm.
as the captain of a starship. So to become a starship captain, you have to pass this test where you make the proper decision, right? And so I think it's called the Kobayashi Maru. It's just a weird
Okay.
name that
Okay.
stuck with me. So you could call it like the Kobayashi Maru, and maybe you wouldn't use it to like graduate an EMDR clinician and like don't let them use it unless they pass it. But what you're speaking about is this builds confidence that when you're actually doing this with a client, you're not going to miss
Hmm.
that moment where you say, ah,
True.
we need to stop beating our head against the wall so that this client doesn't come back ever again. And go backward and say, okay, there's an earlier target here.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how complex you could get with modeling the reprocessing behaviors of someone who even has DID, right?
Yeah. I think we could model what the regular reaction would be from a certain type of client and duplicate that in a simulation. It's doable. Really like the idea. Like with new technology, there will be avatars, photorealistic,
Mhm.
where it puts text to speech, and you would not notice that you're talking with an AI chatbot, for
Mhm.
example. That can be the same. So I really like the idea, like put people to the test. So we're now going to do a trial session. It takes 30 minutes. You're going to do what you always do, but somewhere in the session something happens, and then what do
Mhm.
you do? That will be also something really nice, I think, for the consultation and the practicum when you do EMDR education. So you
Mhm.
can talk about it with your consultant, because I know that people are testing on each other. So trainee to trainee in training, and they're doing role plays in that, and that's
Mhm.
great. But what if you could role play with a real client, real fake client, as I would
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, yeah. And
Would that be
and
something you use?
definitely without a
Hmm.
shadow of doubt, because here's the issue with trainings is okay, so with the practicum, so I'm a facilitator, I handle the practicum. Like the trainer is like massive expert, does the lecturing and so on. The practicum is, of course, that area after the training where they're using the information they just learned with each other, whether that's doing the calm, safe state exercise for state shift and all the things Dutchies don't do, right? So,
Yeah,
all this, all
yeah.
this, all this fluff, like
I don't want to
Ad
say
calls
that,
it
but
like, but yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. And by the way, congratulations on your third World Drivers' Championship. It's just a stereotype that every Dutchie is a Max Verstappen fan, and
that's true.
it's not
That's
as
true.
popular. Anyway,
But we
okay.
are.
All right, so you've got to make an orange background or something like that. I don't
Will do.
know. All right, so okay. Oh, I'm a big F1 fan, so I'm not going to go off on a tangent there and use any more examples, but right, so go Checo. So 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 yes, this would be awesome because the problem with the practicum experience, it's not a problem. I don't want to use that word. The limitation, necessary limitation is that you're not going to be reprocessing a really difficult target, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if the participants reprocess a difficult target with each other, like not only is that possibly going to get into issues that they haven't learned how to deal with, but the client, the person playing the role of the client, that is, um, uh, will possibly just say, "No, I can't do this," or they might start to give inaccurate responses just to, very understandably not fall apart on camera. Um, I think that uh, the larger issue with that isn't so much those, but that if you reprocess a target that's too difficult in practicum, as the fake client, you are getting out of your zone of tolerance for your learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
cannot, you can't, your job as the client is not to like, I always say, look, this is a learning experience, not a therapy experience. So as the client, you're also observing the EMDR process, perhaps in
Mm-hmm.
a more mindful way than when you're the clinician in that. So if you could have a really hard client
Yeah.
that the new EMDR trainee knows that they cannot hurt because it is an AI,
Mm-hmm.
this would be, I think that would be the biggest breakthrough in training in
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I can't say the manual was just rewritten very, very well, and that was a big breakthrough. But I would say that
This
would be the
ethic.
biggest training breakthrough in
Mm,
20 years. And it would also help to really weed out those bad trainings, right?
exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like that, and I think although it's something that's not built yet, in the end, with AI and already what is built, it is not so difficult,
Mhm.
in my opinion. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it later, maybe after the podcast, to talk about it because I
Thanks for
think it's
listening. I told you the ending was going to be cool. It turns out that the day after this interview, Sander and his crew started work on the AI client. Since then, it's been through a number of iterations. Um, I've tested each one, and it gets better with each one. I tested the beta version a few days before this podcast, had a lot of fun with it, and it's going in a great direction. As an MDRIA-approved consultant, I'm extremely happy about this. It's going to solve a lot of problems that I encounter with consultation and training in general. In the next episode, we get into a bit more of the controversy about what's going to happen, which is if Sander's company doesn't do it, someone is going to create an entirely AI-driven EMDR software, entirely AI-driven versions of most any trauma therapy. So stick around for that. As always, our intro and outro music is provided very generously by the band Crack Machine in support of global access to effective trauma therapy. Thanks. See you next time.